Hi, I'm Vespera, and my sister cheated on her fiancé while they were still dating. But when I stopped supporting her wedding, my parents called me ungrateful. What stings worse than betrayal is being told to keep quiet about it, being treated like the villain for finally saying no. They said I was overreacting, that I remembered things wrong. But what if the truth was never welcome in my family in the first place? What else did they hide? And how far were they willing to go to protect the lie? I didn't want to go. That thought had looped in my head all week, but when the car pulled up to the entrance of the restaurant, I took a deep breath and stepped out anyway. The night air smelled like rosemary and sea salt, typical for that part of San Diego, where expensive dinners blurred the reality of everyday family messes. Celine's engagement dinner wasn't some grand gala. It was intimate, elegant, perfectly curated to show the world she was the shining centerpiece. I knew the moment I walked in that I was simply a piece of the decor. The room buzzed with low laughter and clinking glasses. Candles flickered on white tablecloths. I spotted my parents seated at the head table with Celine and her fiancé, Bryce, grinning like campaign managers. I was guided to a table near the back, not isolated, but clearly removed from the spotlight. I didn't say anything. I knew better than to ask questions that would be answered with silences. About 20 minutes in, as salads were cleared and wine refilled, one of Celine's college friends, bubbly, oblivious, raised her glass and said, "I still can't believe you two met in high school and made it through all those crazy college years." Celine laughed. "Oh, we just knew of each other then. We didn't start dating seriously until after graduation." The words hung there. A pause. A clink of silverware. I stared across the room, trying to piece together if I'd misheard. But she said it clearly. Just knew of each other. We were together the entire time she was in college. I remembered sending care packages. I remembered covering for her when she snuck out to meet Bryce during school breaks. The same guy she now claimed didn't matter back then. Nobody seemed to catch the shift in my posture. My back stiffened, but I smiled through it. That's what you do in families like mine. You keep the ugly under wraps. Ironed shirts, polite toasts, betrayal hidden beneath dessert menus. The moment passed quickly. Another toast followed. People laughed. Celine winked in my direction, as if daring me to say something. I didn't. But when I got home later that night, I couldn't sleep. My phone lit up with notifications, mostly from people tagging each other in photos and videos. I clicked on one live stream, posted by Celine's friend Courtney. The clip was only a few seconds long. It was the exact moment Celine denied we dated in high school. I replayed it. Her voice, light and airy, dripping with that self-assured tone she always used when bending the truth. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe she misspoke. Maybe she meant something else. But the laughter that followed, the nodding, the way even Bryce didn't blink, told me it wasn't a mistake. It was rehearsed. I watched it 3 more times. And then I went to the shelf in the hallway and pulled down the family photo albums. The first one was filled with birthdays. Every single one of Celine's. Cake after cake. Outfit after outfit. In most of them, I was the one holding the balloons or carrying the extra chairs. The second album covered our high school years. Homecoming. Celine in a red dress. Me behind the camera. I kept flipping, expecting to find prom. The one I skipped because she cried when I told her Bryce had asked me first. I let her go with him. That photo wasn't there. But even more than that, I wasn't there. It was as if I'd never existed. I found a picture from our Christmas in '07. Celine, Bryce, and my parents were seated on the couch, matching pajamas. I remembered taking that photo. I wasn't in it. Again. It didn't hurt in the way you expect betrayal to feel. It was quieter, like someone pulling up the roots of something you thought was yours. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, photo album open. The video still pulled up on my phone. Was this jealousy? I asked myself that more than once. But no, it wasn't that. It was knowing I'd protected Celine when she was lying to our parents. It was remembering how I canceled weekend plans to help her study, helped pay for her car repair when she totaled it sophomore year, and how I stayed quiet when Bryce cheated and she begged me not to say a word. Now she rewrote history, and nobody even blinked. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. A message from Celine. "Thanks for coming. Hope you didn't feel out of place." I didn't respond. I just stared at the screen, and then I pressed play on the video again, this time watching the way Bryce looked at her when she told the lie. 2 weeks passed. I kept telling myself I'd let it go, that I wouldn't bring it up again. But the weight of Selena's lie didn't disappear. It lodged itself under my ribs like a splinter I couldn't stop picking at. So I showed up at my parents' house on a Saturday morning. Sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of their kitchen, the same ones that had hung there since I was 16. My mom was slicing oranges, humming. Dad sat in his recliner, reading the paper, his glasses pushed down to the tip of his nose. I handed her the envelope. Inside was the check I'd promised, my wedding contribution. Neat handwriting, signed, paid. "Thank you," she said, glancing at it without opening. "That's helpful. The venue deposit was more than we expected." I nodded, then hesitated. "Mom!" At the dinner, when Celine said she and Bryce didn't date back in high school, "You remember we covered for her, right? You and I both knew they were sneaking around." Her knife stopped mid-slice. She didn't look up. "Vespera, why are you bringing this up now?" "Because it bothered me. It felt like she erased me from her story. And no one corrected her." My father cleared his throat behind his paper. She finally turned to face me. "You're just being bitter. You should be happy for her. She's getting married. You know how hard she's worked to make something of herself." There it was. Not a misunderstanding, not a defense, a dismissal. "You're ungrateful," she added, almost casually, as if it were a fact, not a dagger. I didn't argue, I didn't cry. I simply turned around and walked out. The door closed behind me with the softest click, but it echoed all the way to the back of my throat. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the lights off. The only glow came from the microwave clock. I pulled out a sheet of notebook paper and wrote down her words, slowly, like I was engraving them into stone. "You're just being bitter. You should be happy for her. You're ungrateful." In the morning, I folded the note in thirds, placed it neatly under the check I'd prepared again, this time unsigned, and drove back to their house. No one was awake. I slipped the envelope under the sugar jar in the center of the kitchen table. On top of the folded paper, I scribbled one line, "Message received." Then I walked out. I didn't check my phone for the rest of the day. The following week, on my birthday, I got a text from a mutual friend of Celine's, someone I hadn't spoken to since our 20s. "Happy birthday," the message read. "Thought you'd want to see this." Attached was a video, 30 seconds, maybe less. The lighting was dim, music thumping in the background, laughter, screaming, clinking glasses. Celine stood in the middle of a group of women, a tiara crooked on her head. "I didn't even want to invite her," she was saying, wine glass in hand. "Mom made me. She's just awkward." The room erupted in laughter. I watched it once, then again, and a third time, muted. I didn't feel rage. I didn't even feel sadness. What hit me was how unsurprised I was. Like I'd already known, deep down, this was what they thought of me. But now I had the proof. Visual, audible, undeniable. I didn't respond to the text. I deleted the video. Then I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, staring at nothing while the room filled with a silence so dense it felt like it had weight. The group text from the family had lit up throughout the day. Photos of Celine trying on wedding dresses, questions about centerpieces, links to cake designs. I didn't reply. I didn't even open them. I wasn't sure what hurt more, her cruelty or their acceptance of it. But I knew one thing. I was done pretending I didn't see it. That night, I opened my journal. On a fresh page, I wrote, "If telling the truth makes me ungrateful, Maybe it's time I stopped being grateful. The next time I walked into my parents' house, I didn't knock. Mom had texted me earlier that week. Let me know when you can come by. I'm thinking of converting your old room into a reading nook, now that you're not coming back so often. The message wasn't cruel. It was practical, efficient. But there was something in the way she framed it, as if I'd become a guest in the only house that ever truly held my name. It had been years since I stepped foot in my childhood bedroom. The scent hit me first, a mix of old wood, lavender sachets, and dust. Sunlight cut through half-closed blinds, catching on floating specks in the air like a snow globe frozen in time. Boxes lined the walls. One was marked Celine, Elementary. I wasn't looking for anything, not really. But I opened it anyway, out of reflex or instinct, I couldn't tell. Inside were drawings, school ribbons, a pair of ballet slippers with scuffed toes, and near the bottom, a plastic folder with laminated pages. I pulled it out. My stomach tightened. It was an essay, typed, triple-spaced, title in bold. The Oak Tree Outside My Window by Celine Hart. Statewide Young Authors Competition, first place. But I wrote that essay. I remembered sitting at the kitchen table in 7th grade, scribbling lines into a spiral-bound notebook. I wrote about that tree and how it watched over us, about how its shadow stretched into my dreams. I turned in that piece and watched my teacher's eyes widen as she read it, and yet, in that folder, the certificate had Celine's name on it. I flipped the paper over, hoping I'd misread. But there it was, a photo tucked behind it, curled at the corners. My mom and Celine standing in front of a banner that read, "Congratulations, finalists." Celine was holding the certificate. I stood there for a long while, not angry, not even surprised. Just tired. I took the folder. Not to start a fight. I had no desire to hear another "don't dwell on the past." I took it for me. Back at my apartment that evening, I placed the essay on my dining table, then pulled out a storage box from under my bed. Inside were my old journals, dusty, bent, but still intact. I flipped through one from 8th grade, its pages thick with ink and tape. Toward the middle, I stopped. Celine stole my science project today. My own words, written in jagged teenage frustration. She said Mom told her it was okay if we shared, but she didn't do any of it. She even got a ribbon. I told Mom, and she yelled at me for making trouble. Said, "We don't need jealousy in this house." I just walked away. I read it twice. Then, a third time. The pen had pressed hard that day. Some words had nearly torn the page. It wasn't the project. It wasn't the essay. It was the pattern. I leaned back in my chair, the room silent but for the ticking clock on the wall. I could see it now, so clearly it made my jaw tighten. This wasn't about one moment. This wasn't about the engagement dinner or the check or the video. This had always been happening. Slowly, quietly, efficiently. Celine took. Mom polished. Dad pretended not to notice, and I stayed useful. I grabbed a yellow legal pad from my kitchen counter and began to write. Not as a list of grievances, but a map. A timeline. A truth only I had ever bothered to keep. 1999. Science project, 2003. Short story, 2007. College recommendation, 2010. Job reference, 2014. Credit card application, 2016. The grant I wrote and she submitted. I stopped at 6 items. There were more, but I needed air. I walked to the window and opened it wide. Cool air rushed in, clearing the dust, clearing the fog. They didn't just steal the essay, I whispered to myself. They stole the story. And I wasn't going to let them keep it. The notification blinked on my screen just as I was finalizing a license renewal for work. I was logged into my old savings account, one I barely touched anymore, but had kept open for emergencies. I needed to cover a fee, something minor, until I noticed the balance. Lower than it should have been. Much lower. Curious, I clicked into the transaction history. The list was short, but there it was. 3 years ago, a transfer of nearly $5,000 labeled Celine LLC setup. I blinked. Once. Twice. The name sent a ripple through my chest, followed by a dull ache. I didn't remember authorizing that. And even if I had, why would I have used that account? And why for her? I checked the details again, heart pacing ahead of logic. It listed my name as the sender, of course. It was my account. But I didn't remember this. I would have never, especially without being asked. I stared at the screen like it might blink back with an explanation. That evening, after microwaving the same pasta I'd eaten the night before, I picked up the phone and called the bank. It took 3 transfers and a wait that felt longer than Celine's list of betrayals, but eventually, a woman named Donna answered. She was polite, professional, unaware she was about to unravel something I could never put back. "Yes, I see the transaction," she said. "It was processed with documentation from a power of attorney. Dated April 17th. "A power of attorney?" I asked, standing up. "Yes, ma'am. It shows a notarized authorization filed under your name, granting temporary control to Celine Hart. For business setup and financial processing?" I didn't say anything. My throat was dry. "You're not aware of this arrangement?" "No," I said finally. "I never signed anything like that." There was a pause. "Would you like us to send you a copy of the documents for review?" "Yes, please." The line ended politely, but I stayed standing. That was the moment it stopped being confusion and started being strategy. The next morning, at the suggestion of my friend Darcy, who'd been through a nightmare divorce involving hidden credit lines, I pulled my credit report. I'd always kept my score clean, paid on time, never carried more than I needed. Near the bottom of the page was a flag. A business credit card opened under my name and social security number. 3 years ago, linked to a small boutique service. I looked closer at the vendor registration. Luminous Spa LLC. My hands didn't tremble. I wish they had. Instead, I moved in slow, measured silence. Like I'd been preparing for this. I printed everything, transaction logs, credit report, the letter from the bank once it arrived. The signature on the power of attorney form looked like mine, but it wasn't. It was close enough to trick someone who didn't know my handwriting. But I did. There was no mistaking it. I opened a folder and labeled it in thick black ink. Celine, what she owes. Inside, I stacked the pages. Chronological, documented. No more, maybe I misremembered. No more, maybe it's not that bad. It was theft. Not the messy kind. The kind done with soft voices and forged pens. The kind families call helping out until someone ends up broke and wondering how. I sat at my desk, scrolling through old emails. I found one from Celine, dated just 2 weeks after the withdrawal. Subject line, "Finally making moves." Inside, a single line. "So grateful things worked out. Launch day is coming." That spa? It was her baby. Funded, apparently, by mine. I wrote out a message to my parents. I didn't send it. This isn't just about what she took from me. It's what you all let her take. I stared at those words. Let them settle. Let them sting. Because truthfully, that was worse than the theft itself. The voicemail came in late Tuesday night. I didn't recognize the number at first, but it was local, and curiosity got the better of me. I tapped play without much thought, expecting a spam message or a misdialed request for someone named Brian. It was my father. "Ignore her," he said, low and tired, as if the weight of me had become a nuisance. "You know how she gets. She's always had issues sharing the spotlight." The line went dead right after that. No goodbye, no hesitation. I sat still on the couch, the blue glow of the screen washing over the living room walls. I replayed the message once, just to be sure I heard what I thought I heard. Then again, because my body hadn't caught up with my mind. When I finally set the phone down, my hand shook, not from rage, but from the quiet sting of being known so poorly by the man who was supposed to know me best. I didn't save the voicemail. I didn't need to. It etched itself somewhere behind my eyes. That night, I found myself drifting into old memories without realizing it. My brain, traitorous, thorough, pulled up the night of Celine's engagement party. I remembered how I wasn't asked to help plan anything, just told the date and time the week before. When I offered a few suggestions for music and food, Celine smiled and said, "I think we've got it handled, Vess." At the venue, my name wasn't on any seating chart. I had to ask where I was supposed to go. They put me at the furthest table from the head, next to someone's cousin's college roommate. At the time, I chalked it up to disorganization, a hectic day, things slipping through the cracks. But now, weeks later, the picture was clearer than it had ever been. It wasn't disorganization. It was exclusion wrapped in courtesy, and everyone played along. The next day, I got a message I wasn't expecting. "Lucan." It popped up just after lunch. A simple text, no warning. "Hey, heard about the drama. I just wanted to say, I always knew you were the only honest one in that family, and I regret not listening more back then." I stared at the message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure how to respond to something that landed like an apology from another life. I didn't reply. Not yet. But I saved the message. Not for nostalgia. For evidence that even outside the storm, someone had seen me. That night, I sat on my bed with my journal open. I wrote slowly, deliberately. This isn't just my sister's fault. It's everyone who saw the signs and still told me I was overreacting. I flipped to a blank page. At the top, I wrote, "People who knew and stayed silent." The list grew faster than I expected. It wasn't just family. It was teachers who let Celine take the credit. Friends who heard things but never asked questions. Boyfriends who said, "She's just like that." I wasn't bitter. I was awake. By midnight, I felt something settle in my chest. Not peace, not yet, but a kind of clarity I hadn't touched in years. I set my journal aside, picked up my phone, and opened my laptop. I typed Celine's name into a new document template. Legal, simple, direct. I hadn't decided what to do next, but I knew one thing. The silence I'd been raised to keep had never protected me. It only protected them. And if silence is what they gave me, maybe it's time I made some noise. On a gray-skied Thursday morning, I logged into my bank account with no hesitation and even less emotion. I wasn't checking balances anymore. I was reclaiming boundaries. The wedding fund had been sitting in that account since Mom first called me ungrateful. The irony still clung to her voice every time I replayed it in my head, like she was scolding a child for not saying thank you after getting slapped. I typed in the amount. Same digits I'd handed over months ago, before everything unraveled. In the memo line, I wrote, "I don't fund frauds. Consider this my final contribution." I clicked submit. The transaction confirmed with a quiet chime. Then, I took a screenshot and dropped it into the folder I'd been building on my desktop. Family evidence. The folder was starting to resemble something more like a deposition than a diary. Timelines, receipts, saved voicemails, and now this. I sat back in my chair, phone already buzzing before I even closed the laptop. "Celine! You're unbelievable. After all Mom and Dad have done for you?" I didn't respond. There was no point. That kind of message isn't meant to be answered. It's meant to guilt you into stepping back in line. An hour later, my mother called. Then again. Then my father. I let them all go to voicemail. Later that night, I pulled out my notebook and wrote just one sentence. "They've shown me who they are." I just finally believed them. I closed the book, and for the first time, didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. The next day, as I was returning from the post office, my phone buzzed again. Unknown sender. It was Dorian, Celine's college ex, now married to one of our mutual friends. We hadn't spoken in over a decade. His message read, "I heard what's going on. And honestly, I should have said something sooner. Celine and I were still seeing each other back when she was with Lucan. I didn't even know she was engaged. She didn't tell me. I found out through someone else. Attached was a photo, Celine in his lap at a college party, time-stamped 2 months before she and Lucan announced their engagement. She looked happy, relaxed, unbothered. I stared at the photo longer than I needed to, not because it shocked me, but because it confirmed everything I'd already known. I responded simply, "Thank you for telling me. It matters." He replied once more, "You deserve to know." That night, I opened our family group chat, the one filled with memes and passive-aggressive recipes, where Celine shared updates and Mom reminded us about RSVPs for holidays we were no longer pretending to enjoy. I typed slowly, carefully, "I know everything. Don't reach out again unless it's with the truth, or with an apology." Then I hit send, and left the chat. I blocked Celine. I didn't feel powerful. I felt finished. Afterward, I walked to the kitchen, poured myself some water, and turned on my laptop. The glow of the screen lit up my desk, which was now permanently covered in legal pads and sticky notes. I scrolled down the list of case categories and clicked property rights. Because if they thought this was over, they'd miscalculated. The text came from my mother just after lunch on a Sunday. No pleasantries, just, "Let's talk this out as a family. We all want peace. Come by tonight." Peace. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. The same woman who called me ungrateful, who stood silent while Celine siphoned my savings, now wanted to talk about peace. I could have ignored it. I should have. But something inside me, maybe that part still reaching for fairness, said yes. I arrived just before 7 p.m. Their porch light was already on, casting long shadows against the walkway. The air was heavy, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Celine's car was in the driveway. Of course it was. They were waiting for me in the living room. My father with his arms crossed. My mother sitting straight-backed, like she was on a church committee. Celine perched on the edge of the couch, tissue already in hand. The scene was set. "Vespera," Mom started. "We're here because we care. This family has been through enough tension. We want to heal." Then came the manila folder. Timelines, copies of group texts, emails I barely remembered sending, photos, charts. Celine sniffled. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't think you'd take it so far." I didn't say anything. I knew this performance. My father leaned forward. "You need to accept that maybe you remembered things wrong. Memory is tricky. You're digging up old grudges. Old grudges. Forgiveness starts with humility," Mom added. "Can you find that in yourself?" I stood up. "You didn't invite me here to make things right. You invited me here to rewrite history." Celine's tears dried up instantly. She sat back, jaw tight. "I won't play this game," I said. "I came to hear the truth. What I got was a staged intervention. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't give them the satisfaction." Back home, I poured myself some tea. The quiet buzz of my phone pulled me out of my daze. A message from an unexpected name. Astria. Celine's best friend since high school. Bridesmaid. Co-conspirator by all accounts. I opened the message warily. It was short. "I'm not proud of this. But you should have seen it. Check your Dropbox." The link led to a video file. Grainy security footage from what looked like Celine's spa office. In it, she was seated at her desk, laughing with someone off camera. "Vespera won't read it. She never does," Celine said, flipping through papers. "Just get her signature on the back page. She trusts Mom." Then laughter. My breath caught. I paused the video and stared. The document in her hand. The same one I'd signed during a rushed visit to the notary office 2 years ago. "Just updating emergency contacts," Mom had said. I remembered the way Celine had hovered nearby, smiling too much. I watched the clip again, this time with the volume lower. It didn't matter how softly she spoke. The words were carved now, deliberate, cruel, calculating. That night, I pulled on gloves and opened the small fireproof safe I kept tucked in my closet. Inside were every file, contract, receipt I'd ever second-guessed. I sorted through them by date, detail, and relevance. Then I grabbed a binder and labeled it with a thick black Sharpie. Cabin fraud. Inside went the printout of the video still. Celine mid-sentence. Arrogance frozen in time. Behind it, copies of bank statements, the forged power of attorney, the fake signature, the credit report, the check reversal, the messages. I wasn't crying, not from pain, but from the precision of the moment, the razor-sharp awareness that I had not imagined a single thing. They thought they were staging a defense, building a case to contain me. But it turns out I'd been building one against them. The envelope was thick, certified, my name printed in bold at the center, above my apartment address. It came 3 days after I watched Celine laugh about tricking me into signing something I never read. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the counter while I made coffee, while I watered my plants, while I rearranged the contents of the drawer I never opened. But eventually, I sat down and slid it open. Inside was a letter from my parents' real estate attorney. A formal thank you for finalizing the transfer of the family cabin into Celine Hart's sole ownership. He referenced a completed title deed, notarized, with my signature dated last year. I stared at the name at the bottom of the form. Mine. Except it wasn't. It matched the day I'd been dragged to the notary office for what Mom claimed was a quick errand on my birthday. I'd been told it was just to update emergency contact forms, make sure we were covered for healthcare directives. I remember how casual they acted, how rushed they made it feel, how Celine hovered nearby, pretending to scroll on her phone, but watching every move. Back then, I didn't question them. I never thought I had to. Now I knew better. The signature was clean, professional, definitely not mine. I scanned the letter, each word slapping harder than the last. You are no longer a listed co-owner. The property is now fully under Celine Hart, as agreed by all signatories. I put the letter down. My coffee had gone cold. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. I didn't want drama. I didn't want courtroom theatrics or public mess. I wanted facts, documents, consequences. The woman who met me at the office was young, sharp-eyed, and didn't flinch when I handed her the file I'd been building for weeks. She read silently, flipping through screenshots, bank records, voicemail transcripts, the notarized forms, and, last, the printed still from the security video showing Celine mid-laugh. When she looked up, her voice was steady. You have a case, civil fraud at minimum, possibly criminal, depending on how that signature was obtained and filed. Have you confronted them? No, I said, not directly. Good. Let's keep it that way. We spent the next hour reviewing documents, crafting a timeline, highlighting inconsistencies. I was methodical, focused. I didn't cry. When I walked out of her office, I felt taller than I had in years. Back home, I prepared the formal notice, certified envelopes, one addressed to Celine, one to my parents, one to the family lawyer who'd filed the title change. I dropped them off at the post office in the same quiet I'd once reserved for family dinners. No phone calls, no fanfare. The next evening, I got a voicemail from my father. His voice was colder than I expected. You've gone too far, Vespera. This isn't how we handle things in this family. You should have come to us. I played it twice. Then I deleted it. The next morning, I walked into my lawyer's office with my binder tucked under one arm. She looked up from her computer, surprised to see me early. I said just one thing. Let's file. The courtroom was cold. Not in temperature, but in tone. Sterile. Still. The kind of quiet that makes your heartbeat feel too loud. Celine sat at the table across from me, next to her attorney. She didn't look at me, not once. The judge's voice was steady, unfazed. I barely heard the legal jargon until the sentence that mattered landed like a brick. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Vespera Hart. The cabin property title is to be reinstated to her name, and restitution shall be paid by the defendant for misrepresentation and unauthorized transfer. I didn't smile. There was no joy in that room, only silence. I glanced over to my parents, seated behind Celine. My father's jaw clenched so tight it looked locked. My mother kept her eyes low, fingers tangled in a tissue she never used. They didn't speak to me, not in the hallway, not outside, not even when I passed them in the parking lot. And that was fine. When I stepped out of the courthouse, I didn't feel like I'd won anything, but I did feel steady, like the ground had stopped shifting beneath me. Back at my apartment, the first thing I did was open the last remaining box in my hallway closet, one I hadn't touched since I moved in. Inside were a few old keepsakes, including a photo of me and my grandfather, standing in front of the cabin, both of us in oversized flannel and holding mugs of cocoa. He had built that place, nailed every board himself. He taught me how to drive on the gravel road behind it. That cabin was more than a piece of property. It was a piece of me. I cleaned the glass, placed it in a wooden frame, and set it gently on my nightstand. A few days passed. The noise from the case faded. No more emails, no more threats, just space. Then came a text from Ilara, Celine's daughter, 17 and sharper than anyone gave her credit for. I know what they did to you, and I just want you to know I'm proud of you. I stared at the message for a long time, my fingers motionless over the screen. It was the first time anyone in that family had ever said those words to me. I didn't reply right away. I just let myself cry. The kind of cry that didn't come from sadness, but from sheer release, like I'd been holding my breath for years. The following weekend, I drove to the cabin. It took a few hours. The road familiar, but quieter than I remembered. The cabin was still standing, though the wood had grayed and the steps creaked louder than they used to. I didn't mind. I unlocked the door, let it swing open, and stepped into the dust and memory. I built a small fire. It crackled like a welcome back. I pulled the framed photo from my bag and placed it on the mantel. Then I sat in the armchair, wrapped in the silence of my own choosing. I wrote in my journal that night, beside the firelight, letting each word fall gently onto the page. This is not revenge. This is reclamation, and I don't need them to acknowledge it, because I finally do. The fire burned low. The air outside was cold, but inside, I felt something close to peace. Some wounds don't close, but they stop bleeding, and for now, that's enough. Looking back, I didn't fight for revenge. I fought for recognition. I stood up not because I needed them to apologize, but because I needed to stop apologizing to myself. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most are the ones who taught you to stay silent. But silence doesn't protect us. Truth does. And reclaiming your voice, your name, your worth, it's never too late. Have you ever been treated like your memory didn't matter? Like your truth was too inconvenient to be heard? I'd love to hear your story. If this video moved you or made you think, leave a comment with one or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, tell me why. I'm here to listen. If this story touched something in you, don't forget to subscribe for more true life tales that reflect the heart of everyday people. Let's keep growing together.